Welcome to the session. I'm Adam Schwartz. I'm a senior UX researcher here on the user experience research team at Jamf. And today we're going to talk about how you can understand some of your end users a little bit better. So the three areas we're going to cover in the next few minutes. First, we're going to talk about the discipline of human-centered design and how it can be helpful for you. Then we're going to delve into two specific tools. We're going to talk about personas and then journey mapping. Human-centered design is the first area. So this is a discipline which allows you to have a process for innovation. Human-centered design, as the name, as you might imagine from the terminology, is a way to design things that are focused on the people, on the users that use these things. There are all sorts of engineering design things, computer design things. These are very well and good, but human-centered design focuses on the people who are using the system and who want to get things out of the system. It is a way to create new things. You typically start with a problem. In any situation in life, when you're trying to design something, you're usually starting with a problem. With human-centered design, however, you don't say, I have this problem, let's solve it. Looking at this diagram here, you start with the initial problem, and then you explore this problem space. You do some divergent thinking. You get a group of people together, and you start to explore, what is this problem? You have all sorts of different brainstorming exercises to try to explore, how do we know what this problem is? Are there other angles to it? You end up with lots and lots of different variations of the same problem that you started with. And then, as a group, you come together and you condense. Now that you found maybe 5 or 6 different variations of your initial problem, you start to condense down to one new problem. This new problem, after you've explored the problem space, is almost never the same thing as your initial problem. And this is important because if you're trying to solve what you think is your initial problem, but you haven't actually explored with your group what possible variants are, you're potentially not solving the actual real issue here. Then, so now we're in the middle with this new problem in the green. Once you have figured out what you're actually trying to work on, then you start solving it. You do the same process. You do all sorts of divergent thinking to figure out what could different solutions be. Maybe you do some different testing. Maybe you talk to more people. Maybe you do some journey mapping, as we'll talk about in a few minutes. You have all sorts of different possible solutions. And then you start testing them. You start coming down again and again, closing down, and then you end up with a solution. By going through the double diamond model as part of human-centered design, you are much more likely to end up in a place where you actually are happy with a solution that solves the real problem. You have to have a variety of different attitudes when you're entering into this problem. We're going to start with humility. If you think that you are the biggest expert and that you know everything and that you've done this a million times before, human-centered design is probably not going to work very well for you. You have to know that no matter how clever you are, other people are also clever, and there's loads of good ideas out there, and sometimes your idea is not the best idea. So ego is definitely an enemy to human-centered design. You have to have a curious mindset. What are different possibilities out there? What are ways of solving this? What are different offbeat ideas? If you have lots and lots of ideas, even if many of them are bad ideas, and that's okay, more good ideas will flow. There's a huge body of creativity research that says the first couple ideas that come up are, many people will have the same first ideas. There's a very common paperclip test where you give people a paperclip and you say, write down 20 ideas out of this that you can do with this paperclip, things you can do with it. If I gave 10 of you that paperclip test, and you were struggling to think of your ideas, and after a couple minutes you made your list of 10 or 20 ideas, the first 5 or 6 would be remarkably similar amongst all of you. But when you get to ideas like 7 to 20, then you'll have the real novelty. So an idea of curiosity, of poking around, of of exploring things, that'll really help you with the human-centered design. Empathy is crucial. This is human-centered design. It's hard to have empathy for machines, although of course it's possible. But we have empathy for users. Think of the people who are using your system, your product, or your service. That will really help you push through. And one of the first tool we'll be exploring here, personas, will deal all about empathy. Imagination. What's possible? It's okay to have, no, blue sky iteration is what we want. Blue sky thoughts, thinking, what are all the things that could possibly happen here? Iteration. Design is an iterative process. No one's perfect. You're never going to get the perfect design done. You'll never create the perfect product or the perfect service. Knowing that it's okay if it's not perfect, knowing that it's okay if it's good, if it's better than it was, is a really crucial attitude. And finally, collaboration. Almost no one does design by themselves. Well, you can do it, and it's okay to do it that way, but it's a lot more efficient to do it with other people. Working together with other people allows different perspectives, and then you can really create something better that will serve more users. Speaking of collaboration, there's a variety of tools that will work for this. The way I learned to do this in the before COVID area was in a room with an actual whiteboard and a lot of different Post-it notes. And that's a really good way of doing it. But in today's global environment, and also with the fact that sometimes we're not meeting in person, we're doing a lot of remote work, there's a whole host of tools that are helpful. Mural, Miro, Lucidcharts, all of those are tools that are designed to allow online collaboration. These are online whiteboards with Post-it notes, and they work very well. Of course, you don't need a purposeful tool. They're very good, but if you have Google Slides, I've done this with Google Slides and that works just fine. There's any sort of space where you can collaborate and you can move things around on a board together and everyone can see it. That's basically all you need. Okay, let's talk about our first tool of personas. So personas are a common term. They're used in all sorts of different disciplines. We use them in design, they're used in marketing, engineering uses them, and groups have different ways of talking about them. But in general, personas are a fictional character. They're not a real person. They are a fictional character which captures a segment of a population. Personas are research-based. You don't say, I'm going to do a persona, and then I'm just going to make up everything in this persona. To do a good persona, this needs to be based on something. It has to have some substance behind it. Personas let you test things and prioritize things. When you're designing a system, you want to design it based on the constraints of your persona. And we'll go into that a little bit more about things they care about. And finally, like I mentioned before, personas help you build empathy. You're not building this computer software or this program or this service for the user. You don't know who the user is, or maybe I have an idea of who the user is and you have an idea, and the person next to you has an idea of who the user is, but these could be very different ideas of who the user is and what they like to do. Personas get it all out in the open. So, again, there's lots of different answers to what components a persona could have. But pretty common ones are a picture, a name, a description, a quote, goals, and attitudes. Things they do, things they care about. When you see these things, this allows you to know what sort of constraints this user has, what this user cares about, and who this person is. And that lets you decide, well, maybe I shouldn't have these extra 4 buttons here. My persona of Kim would find that too complicated. Or maybe I need to add 7 more options here because the certain persona I have really wants to configure things and make everything work the way that she wants. Here at Jamf, we have 6 user personas that we've created. And we're working on a couple more as our business keeps growing. The first one is Mark. Mark is the Mac admin guru. He's the best at the business. He knows everything there is to know about how to do Mac admin work. He just wants to manage things without having to compromise. You can see here what he does, where he is. There's a picture of him. There's a good quote about what he cares about. Talks about his skill level, how many devices he manages, how much time he spends doing device management, and what technologies he's adept with. And then there's Kyle. Kyle's a jack of all trades. He has a little different skill set. He's not as focused on the Mac admin work. Kim is a tech evangelicist. She really wants to use technology for other purposes to helping other people. Nathan isn't the IT person. However, someone's got to do it, and Nathan stepped up to do it. Maybe he's not classically trained. He spends a lot less time. Mark spends most of his day doing device management. According to this persona, Nathan spends less than an hour a day doing it. And instead of having 57,000 devices, Nathan's responsible for 36 devices or whatever that is. You would design something very differently for Mark than for Nathan. Emma's an educator. She's using, her main goal is technology, is teaching kids how to use something, but she needs to know how to use Jamf or any other technology in order to help her kids learn better. So again, for each of these sorts of people, you would design things differently. And having the personas in front of you lets you say, instead of talking about the user, you're talking about Mark or Kyle. And with these personas prominently displayed, everyone knows the constraints of these users and what they care about. So as a quick guide to making these personas, first you need to figure out what research you're basing these on. Maybe you have a pile of user interviews. Maybe there's a lot of observations you've done. Maybe everyone in the room spends time in schools or spends time in workplaces and has done contextual inquiries, which is where you go there and you watch and you ask people questions. Then you figure out, based on this data we have here, these are the sorts of segments that are coming up from our groups of people that we might be dealing with here. Then you start to figure out, you flesh those out. You write a description for each type, that's these personas that you're building. You give them a name and a picture to build empathy. You describe them. You're like, what makes this person who they are? Is there an education background? Is there a professional background they have? You figure out what they need to do, what their goals are, what are their attitudes. You give them a quote that's like really, it gets to who they are in their work life or their personal life. That's okay too. And then finally, you make a snazzy one-page descriptor that you can pass out around your company and your team. At the Jamf office in Minneapolis, we have huge posters of these user personas all over our department. And displayed in meetings, and they're also in meeting rooms, so people can point at things and say, this is what Kyle would want in this device. So now let's talk about a different tool called journey mapping. So there's lots of different ways of doing journey mapping also, but in its basic form, you're trying to figure out what users do. This could be what users actually do today, or this could be what do you want users to do in the future? You're diagramming or you're modeling an experience. This can be an experience as of, a minute, or this could be an experience as of several years. What is this journey from your arbitrarily decided beginning and endpoints? How are these people traveling? You're curious about the high points and the low points. You want to know, when are these people happy and when are they not happy? You care about what systems, what interactions, people, places, and things they're dealing with. All of that can be relevant as you're journey mapping. So here's a kind of journey mapping that is pretty easy to do. So we call this happy face, sad face. So if you look in the middle here, there's a horizontal line that divides everything between, up top you have a happy face, and at the bottom you have a sad face. So starting wherever you want, you're mapping what this person does on their journey. Every time they do something that's a positive experience, it goes above the line, and that's a happy thing. Below the line, it's a sad thing. It looks like this person is veered from one to the other all day in this particular picture. But sometimes you're just having a rotten day or a rotten time with the system and it's all below the line. Now, other things to notice here, there's some different colorful choices here. There's 3 different colors. There's a vertical line to mark a transition. And there's some pictures and captions here. This really lets you know what's going on, and you can really see what's happening and make this a more vivid journey map. Here's a physical map. This is less relevant for us in software, but sometimes you're trying to design a service. And you're curious about what is the larger holistic experience that someone is doing. So they can have an actual physical journey map where you sketch out where they're going and what are the interesting stops along the way. You can put actual pictures into this, photorealistic ones. You can do exploded diagrams of how things actually look. But again, there's lots of captions and lots of ways of explaining this. Looking at this journey map, you can understand where they are in their journey and where you want them to go. Time-based journey maps. So for this, you've listed out every single time demarcation that you want. And you're seeing what happens when they are, where they are. There's a couple icons here. There's some captions. There's a bunch of different quotes here. Sometimes it's really good to have quotes to really understand what's going on with people and how they're feeling. Here's a swim lanes one. This is a very common type also. So for this, you divided up this person's journey into people, places, and things. So again, you've listed this out ahead of time as part of your journey map, and you're seeing what this person is doing as they're journeying throughout today. You've mapped out everything they're doing, all the people they see, all the things they interact with, and all the places they go. Now places, in this case, they're actual buildings. And you can see they have clever pictures for them and cute captions and all that. Places can be website places. It's different software places. How are they doing these things? Where are they going? And are they good experiences or bad experiences? Now, as you can see, I've just talked briefly about 4 different types of journey mapping. They're all legitimate, they're all kosher, they're all happy ways of doing things. But, sometimes you want to use one versus the other. Here's an example of one that we did recently at Jamf. I was working with the .com team. We were trying to figure out, how do you all access webinars? So first we started with a persona. We used one of those personas that we saw earlier. And then we had a scenario. The person wants to use a webinar, or the person wants to view a webinar. We started at the first orange dot. Oh, I guess other elements. That big purple dot includes some background data about how many people are accessing webinars now and what we want and all that. If people are satisfied with our webinars. Then we started with the first orange dot, and then we went through each possible step of the way people are using to access our webinars. We put clever icons above each of them. And for some of the yellow post-it notes, below them, we put actual pictures, screenshots from Jamf.com as how people are trying to sign up and where they're having issues. So then, once the entire group had agreed on each of these different steps that the users are using, we then went through and then we did a rose, thorn, bud exercise where you characterize things, you color code items as good, bad, or opportunities. And then we put those on top of different steps as a group. So we left the room knowing what the current stage, how people are interacting with our webinars, and we left as a group with some ideas of what are some ways to maybe improve things so people will have more pleasant journeys in the future. So, your quick guide for doing journey mapping, you figure out what sort of research you're basing this on. Again, you want this research-based. Do the process yourself. Have everyone in the team do the process yourself. Talk to people. Look to see what customer complaints you've had. Do all of the above. Figure out what you're really honing in on. You can have lots of different journey maps for the same larger experience, and that's okay too. Figure out, though, which really small things you want to study and do a map of. discover who you want to use, what personas, or actual individual people even, you want to have their experience mapped out. Figure out what elements you want to use. People, things, places, websites. Decide which of those formats I showed or other ones you want to use. Illustrate it. Make it exciting to look at. Make this fun. And then finally figure out what's going well and what's going bad for this person's experience. So, takeaways. Here's what I want you guys to have learned in this last half hour or so, 20 minutes, whatever it is. Human-centered design is a larger discipline that has a lot of really cool techniques to figure out what your users are doing. Two of those techniques are personas and journey maps. They're really nifty things. I'm glad you all listened. I hope this was interesting for you. We have a UX booth. So if you come there, there should be a spot to sign up, and we can help you figure out how to make your own personas and journey maps. Thank you so much.